Sudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskrityam Narottam Devi Saraswatim Nashtapraisha Bhattreshu Nityam Bhagavati Bhakti Anardhopashamam Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje Lokasya Janato Vidvams Chakri Satvata Samhitam. Okay. I'm going to break it and you may repeat after me. After that, you can take turns. Anardhopashamam Sakshat
Anarthopashamam Sakshat
Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje
Bhakti Yogam Adokshaje
Lokasya Janato
Lokasya Janato
Lokasya Janato Vidvams
Lokasya Janato Vidvams
Chakre Satvata Samhitam.
Chakre
Chakre Satvata Samhitam.
Okay, go ahead, please, volunteers.
I can try, Mataji.
Yeah, please.
Anardhopashamam Sakshat
Anardhopashamam Sakshat
Bhakti Yogam Adokshaje
Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje
Lokasya Janato Vidvams
Lokasya Janato Vidvams
Chakre Satvata Samhitam.
Chakre Satvata Samhitam.
Two of you, two more volunteers can go ahead, but please recite it yourself so we can have some time for the discussion.
Go with Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Anardhopashamam Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje Lokasya Janato Vidvams Chakre Satvata Samhitam. Hare Krishna.
Can I do Mataji?
Yes, yes, please.
Anarthopashmam sakshat bhakti yogam adokshase lokasya janato vidyams chakre satvata samhitam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare. All right. Yeah. Word to word and translation.
Krishna.
Yeah, please.
Anartha, things which are superfluous. Upashamam, mitigation. Sakshat, directly. Bhakti Yogam, the linking process of devotional service. Adokshaje, onto the transcendence. Lokasya, of the general mass of men. Ajanataha, those who are unaware of. Vidvan, the supremely learned. Chakre, compiled. Satvata, in relation with the supreme truth. Samhita, Vedic literature. Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, Hare. Translation.
The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth.
Right. Thank you. So we'll go with the sloka. Since the purport is small, I will let you read the purport, please.
Hare Krishna Mataji, you can. Srila Vyasadeva saw the all-perfect personality of Godhead. This statement suggests that the complete unit of the personality of Godhead includes his parts and parcels also. He saw, therefore, his different energies, namely the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. He also saw his different plenary portions and parts of the plenary portions, namely his different incarnations also. And he specifically observed the unwanted miseries of the conditioned soul, who are bewildered by the external energy. And at last, he saw the remedial measure of the conditional souls, namely the process of devotional service. It is great transcendental science and begins with the process of hearing and chanting the name, fame, glory, etc. of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Revival of the dormant affection or love of Godhead does not depend on the mechanical system of hearing and chanting, but it solely and wholly depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. When the Lord is fully satisfied with the sincere efforts of the devotee, he may endow him with his loving transcendental service. But even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of the superfluous and unwanted miseries of material existence. Such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. Rather, knowledge is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of the supreme truth. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's beautiful. Yeah. Anarthopashamam sakshat bhakti yogam adokshaje. Anartha upasamam. Artha is our purpose, our goal. Anartha is something that is not our purpose, not our goal. So our goal is to reciprocate with Bhagavan lovingly. Right? That's the goal. That loving reciprocation with Bhagavan. Loving, prema, reciprocation, devotional service, bhakti, prema, bhakti is our goal. Anything that's not other than this loving reciprocation is anartha. Anything that comes in between or stops us from doing that, interferes us from doing that is anartha, simply that. It can be a gross anartha, it can be a subtle anartha, whatever it is. But if it is not facilitating us to reciprocate lovingly with Bhagavan, that's anartha. So that anartha, upasamam. Upasamam is mitigated. They'll be mitigated, subsided. Sakshat bhakti yoga madokshaje. How do they get mitigated? All those unwanted things that are getting in our way to reciprocate with Bhagavan. By doing bhakti yogam adokshaje. By taking up this process of hearing about adokshaja, talking about adokshaja, thinking about adokshaja, doing for adokshaja. When we are doing them regularly with some effort from our side, since we are beginners only and we don't have taste for any of these things yet. But if there is volunteer effort regularly, every day, every hour, doing our best with whatever we have at that point of time, that constant ongoing efforts to connect to Adokshaja, Lord Krishna within, that is Bhakti Yoga. So when we are constantly trying to connect and reciprocate with Adokshaja, then whatever that is coming in our way to reciprocate with him slowly, gradually fade away. They fall apart, they get mitigated. Lokasya janato. Lokasya. Not everybody knows that this is what is going on with us, with the jivas, that our ardha is to reciprocate with Bhagavan, and there can be many things that may come in between to reciprocate with Bhagavan, and those are our problems. This part not everybody knows. They do not know, ajanato. So since they do not know, vidvams chakre, vidvans, the learned panditas, here it's Vyasadeva, chakre, he combined Sattvata Samhitam, this Vedic literature, to give this information that we are, our ardha is reviving relationship, and all the anarthas would mitigate when we take up the bhakti yoga process. To give this specific message to all the mankind, sage Vyasa, he compiled this Vedic literature. And the context of this sloka is, Narada was still talking to Vyasadeva, and Narada instructed him, saying, okay, now please meditate more on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give more elaborate details about the pastimes and increase the glorification of the Supreme Lord. He gave those instructions and he said, now please, you are qualified. You meditate. See what you see in your meditation. And based on that, you please start compiling this work again. Yeah, start glorifying the Lord again. So after saying that, Vyasadeva, he went into deep trance, and there he saw when these sages go in deep trance, they go into a different state of existence. The normal level, wakeful level, and the sleep level, dream level, and past that is the deeper levels of consciousness. So they go to that state to perceive the reality. In that perception, Vyasadeva saw that absolute truth, Lord Sri Krishna, is not just by himself, but he's with his part and parcels. That is Jiva Shakti. Yeah. And there is Antarangika Shakti. That is Bhakti Shakti. And there is also Maya Shakti. Yeah. So he saw Lord Krishna with his Shaktis, as we discussed in the past, these three energies. The Maya Shakti is called external energy or Bahiranga Shakti. Jiva Shakti is called Tatastha Shakti. And internal energy, internal potency is Bhakti Shakti. He saw that in his meditation. So he saw this Lord and these three energies. He also saw that the Jiva Shakti is being trapped by Maya Shakti. In other words, the Jivas were turning to Maya, not turning to Krishna. And because of that, they were starting to have illusion and miseries. So that was the starting point, the root cause. Jiva was turning to Maya, away from Krishna, which triggered all the problems to Jiva. That he saw. And he saw the third thing too. He realized that this Jiva can get liberated from these miseries and can be more happy if this Jiva is turning towards Bhagavan. So turning towards Bhagavan is taking up the process of bhakti. And if that thing is done by Jiva, then all the miseries of the Jiva would start mitigating. So that also Vyasadeva saw. And this is why Narada was saying, you go into meditation and now please start glorifying the Lord. So since Jiva's solution to the problem is not to look at Maya, but to look at Krishna, not to get caught up with the activities or thoughts not related to Krishna, but try to engage oneself in the activities and thoughts related to Krishna. By doing that, the Jiva would get rid of the miseries. So that's the context and the meaning of this sloka. And here, Srila Prabhupada's explanation is so beautiful. He already mentioned about, how Lord and his three energies are seen by Vyasadeva here. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, just because we take up the process of Bhakti Yoga, start to hear about Krishna, do things for Krishna, just because we are doing it, it does not necessarily mean that we will start feeling that love for Krishna and reciprocate in the form of loving devotional service. That change from within, that natural feeling from within, the attraction and loving reciprocation to Bhagavan is, that happens only with the mercy of Bhagavan, not just because I took up the process of bhakti and I'm doing something every day. Nevertheless, because I took up the process of bhakti, because I'm trying to do something regularly all the time, that can invoke the mercy of the Lord at some point. And then that mercy can cause some change in my heart. That will bring fulfillment to me in terms of reciprocating with Bhagavan. That change in the heart itself is a solution for all the problems. Whatever problems that we think we have with ourselves or with people around or with things around, they would not exist anymore when the change in the heart happens. And that change in the heart happens by the mercy of the Lord. But we can invoke the mercy by constantly trying and prayerfully, submitting, not demanding, but constantly trying and wait for the mercy. So, yeah, I guess that is it. I'll pause here and see if you have any questions, reflections.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Hare.
Could you clarify the last few statements, what Prabhupada said in the purport a little bit more? But even the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there's one at once mitigation, and then such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. So these last three sentences,
But even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of the superfluous and unwanted miseries of material existence. Such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. Beautiful. Rather, knowledge is dependent. Okay. So what Srila Prabhupada is saying is, even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, even in the sadhana bhakti, when we are trying to just voluntarily do it with no particular connection internally, even that can mitigate the problems. I mean, in the bhakti process, two things happen. Just because we started bhakti, though internally there is no attachment that has developed, the potency of bhakti is such that it brings two things. One is Shubhada, the other one is Kleshagni. Shubhada is auspiciousness. Kleshagni is mitigation of the miseries.
Mhm.
That happens automatically for anybody who take up the process of bhakti, even before they know the whole process of bhakti, all the knowledge related to bhakti, and even before they develop any attachment to the serious practice of bhakti. Just because they started mechanically also, they will start seeing these two things. Shubhada and Kleshagni. Auspiciousness is started, and material miseries they start mitigating. Yeah, even with the process of taking up, even before they know everything about this. And for
so,
that, go ahead.
So, Mataji, the last sentence.
Yeah, such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledges. So, development of transcendental knowledge is knowing more deeper aspects of bhakti. Yeah. So even before we know deeper aspects of bhakti, there is already mitigation of the material miseries happening.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, even in sadhana bhakti, there will be mitigation of miseries happening.
Okay.
Yeah. Knowledge is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of supreme truth. This is the latest stage of bhakti. In the beginning stage, the mitigation of miseries is happening automatically, even before we have depth of knowledge in bhakti. But in later stage, the knowledge that comes out in the later stage of bhakti is not an informational accumulated knowledge. This knowledge is dependent on devotional service because of their potency of the devotional service, which means connection with the Lord, reciprocation with the Lord. The knowledge, realized knowledge, descends to them. So they don't have to accumulate a lot of information from outside. But because they are offering devotional service with all earnestness and seriousness, they will start realizing the truth. That's why knowledge is dependent on devotional service. So as they're doing the devotional service, they will realize more knowledge.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you so
So
much.
either way, it is hopeful. In the beginning also, it is hopeful. And at the later stages, it gets more hopeful. Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, Mataji, I was asking about the in many verses, Adhokshaje is used for the Supreme Lord. What is the actual meaning of the word Adhokshaje?
Adhokshaja, that cannot be comprehended by our material senses. It can mean just absolute truth, Brahman, or the personification of Brahman, Lord Krishna.
Something which cannot be perceived by material senses.
Yes, yes. That's Adhokshaja.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Shall we go with the Bhajana? And I was thinking, Nitai Gunamani Prabhu, depending on the time that we have, the last few minutes, maybe we could just sing the song only, the bhajan only, or the bhajan and translation if there is time like that, since we have 4 days like that, right? So maybe, just the bhajan today.
And our intent is to kind of end by 9:30, right, Mataji?
Yeah, that's the intent. Also, simultaneously, hear something from the acharyas. So at least the lyrics, at least their words.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Share my screen. So I think we can just do the Acharya's bhajan without the
Yes.
translation today.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Today's bhajan is by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur from the book Sharanagati. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jive Doya